Hey, Ricardo. And put the chat, and we're good there. Okay, so thank you all for being here at our Community Advisory Board meeting for the month of December. Very excited to talk about all of the things. I do want to start the meeting by offering condolences, Ricardo, to you and the Marana staff at the loss of Mayor Honey. I know that was very unexpected, and our well wishes to your community because that's a big deal. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And so today, really our efforts today will be 100% focused on our strategic planning work and everything that we accomplished at the last meeting. So Robin will go through that. I would like, let's see, there were a couple people here that were not at that last meeting. So I would like you guys to please just introduce yourselves. Let's just have everybody introduce themselves real quickly. So Robin is aware of who you are. And that way she can connect you up with everything as we go forward. Okay. So let's start. It's in my bottom right. Chris, why don't you go first?
Hi, my name is Christopher Sanderson, or Chris is fine. I'm a faculty member at the University of Arizona. In the College of Education, and specifically the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Sociocultural Studies. I teach in a variety of programs, but my area of scholarship is specifically digital equity and inclusion in the K-12 space, but also digital literacies and using technology for education and also just the betterment of life.
That's awesome. So great. Ricardo, how about if you go next?
Hello, Ricardo Carlos. I'm the IT director here at the town of Marana. One of the biggest initiatives that we've been doing is focusing on helping to expand high-speed internet access here in the town, working in collaboration with Pima County on the Middle Mile project, and really just helping to drive focus on that. And actually, I've asked the town manager's office to make this one of the legislative priorities for the 2025 year.
Yay, I'm so excited. And that reminds me to talk to you after this meeting because there's other stuff that I need to make sure you're aware of. Alan, go ahead.
Alan Thomas, Deputy Director of IT at Pima County. I'm here to, as an advisory capacity and also working at a Middle Mile project. Once they start digging, I guess. So, which we're very excited about.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mary?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Machado, and I'm with the Office of Digital Inclusion, and I am Michelle's assistant. Hello.
All right, Alan, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Alan Wallen. I run a small wireless ISP in Southern Arizona.
Awesome. Manny, let's go. Manny, Mike, and Caroline.
Thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. Manny Felix with AZ Cyber Initiative. We're a nonprofit focused on workforce development through cybersecurity and emerging tech.
Awesome.
Hello, everybody. It's Mike Edmonds. I live in Tucson House, involved in Thrive in EO5. Also live in Ward 3, and then the community liaison for Vice Mayor Kevin Dahl for the city of Tucson, and generally involved in all things with an electron.
So,
hi, everyone. I'm Caroline Lewis. I'm the Community Engagement Program Manager for the Pima County Health Department. I'm also here in an advisory role. I do most of our outreach and access to care work out in Ajo. So
great. And then Carlos and Jennifer.
Hi, all. Carlos Valles with Sahuarita and Marana Food Banks and Community Resource Centers. I'm just happy to be a part of the group.
Hi, all. I'm Jennifer Stanowski. I'm the Director of Workforce Development at Literacy Connects. And my department serves the students in our 2 adult programs, our English language acquisition program and our adult basic literacy program. So I'm overseeing and supporting our efforts for digital inclusion with our student population and with our partners in the community.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so very much. I'm going to hand the meeting over to Robin, let her introduce herself and dive right in. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. And now it's official. You are muted, Robin.
Oh, I was muted, but then I was trying to share, and so then it wasn't letting me unmute and do all the things.
Always
All
a
right. Okay, so I am going to put into the chat some links for you all. It's the slide deck that I'm pulling up the outcomes 1.0. If you want to see it in a spreadsheet, we're going to walk through the slide deck. And then the feedback form, which is what you want to open so you don't have to do any homework later. And because let me introduce myself. I missed that in the process of trying to mute and share and all the things. So my name's Robin Bro. I'm with Lead Local, and Erica Nassim, who some of you met last time, can't be here today, but she's working with me on this project, and we're really glad to be here and to bring a human-centered design to the strategic planning for the Office of Digital Inclusion, because the work y'all are doing is really important, and it's a lot of systems change work, and it's kind of a fundamental to so many other initiatives being successful. So what we wanted to do today was give you an update of where we are and get feedback. So I'm going to do a quick review of human-centered design and the process we're using and kind of how it fits into into systems change for those of you who weren't here last time. And then I'm going to walk through the outcomes that we mapped last time. So for those of you who weren't able to join us in person in, I guess it was November, we did a lot of brainstorming around our long-term, midterm, and short-term outcomes that we wanted to see and what those goals were. So everybody put sticky notes and we discussed and did a lot of ideation, and Eric and I took those and turned them into the first draft of what those strategies are and the outcomes that fall under them. And we're going to use these again and take them out to the community, use them to gather more information during the human-centered design feedback process. And but we wanted to get your feedback first with this one. And so the feedback form that I dropped into the chat, if you could open that, because then you do your homework while we're here and you don't have to do it. You can do it in class rather than, when you get home and you have a lot of other things to do. But they are a little bit, they're outcomes. It's heady work to do strategic planning. So if you need more time, you do have that link, and Michelle can send it out to you right after the meeting too. We would like your feedback done by next week so we can get started on things. And then the last piece, which is also in the feedback form, is calendar commitment. So we're asking all of you all to help us reach the community that we need to reach to understand their needs so that we can have a good strategic plan. So are there any questions before I jump into the rest of it? Cool. Okay. So human-centered design is basically a process that puts people at the center. And we're using, there are a lot of different models for human-centered design. It comes basically out of design thinking, which, Harvard and Stanford always claim, but also centers the people at not the product or the end goal, but people and what they really need. What are their wants and needs? And the process that we're using is designed to kind of build community while doing human-centered design. And so it's designed to maximize assets and minimize waste. And so we are, as a council, you can see, kind of backbone stewards, the people that are moving the initial planning of the digital inclusion initiative through the steps where we get to explore and see what really works, ask people, get out in the community with community events, hear what they have to say, work with them while we kind of envision how they want to use technology and how, digital access and inclusion can help them. And then we create the strategic plan from their feedback that then you will move into the next steps. why I like human-centered design, I think why Michelle asked us to come and help with this process, is because it really starts to get at how you do systems change. And the work that you all are doing, as you understand, and we discussed a lot last time, is really systems change. How do we get digital inclusion, embedded in all of the things we do, because you really do need those skills to be able to participate today. And so I dropped in here the FSG Waters of System Change model, because I think it's one of the best ones that I've seen. And they outline that there's 3 different kind of areas of systems change. There's the structural change, right? The policies, practices, and resource flows. These are the things that are explicit that you can go find on a county website, right? And resource flows may be less explicit and transparent, but hopefully explicit. Then you have the relationships, which are semi-explicit, right? Like, this is how changing relationships keep those feedback loops and policies and practices working. It's the connections that we have, the power dynamics that are at play in any context. And then where the real change comes from is the transformative changes, the mental models. And why using a human-centered design approach is really important, because we need to understand not only what people see that they need, but also the mental models from, folks on the ground, constituents, to the organizations, community-based organizations that are serving them, and governmental organizations, because as we've already talked about last time, there's like a real shift in thinking about how you incorporate digital inclusion and whose job is it and what does it mean. So to do this work, we need to hear from people, not just constituents on the ground. That's really important, but also to engage our organizations that are helping us connect to people in a kind of networked approach, so that we understand their mental models and we can help shift and design to bring folks along. I'm gonna pause. Any questions before we go? No, that's a lot, but I just want to give a little framing for people who weren't here last time. Okay, cool. So as we jump into the outcomes drafts that we started last time, the 2 questions that you'll have for both short and midterm of each of the strategies, and there's 4 strategies, are: which communities are most impacted by this issue, and how can we ensure they're meaningfully included? You don't have to worry about whole sentences. We just want to capture what you're thinking and who we should really be reaching out to. And then what would success look like, and how might we measure it? So these are all things that Michelle's office has thought about already. We have a really nice list of community-based organizations to work with, but we really want you all to put on your thinking cap, because you're on the ground often with people, and want to make sure we're gathering from you that feedback as well. And then finally at the end, but we'll get to that later, we'll ask you to make some commitments of how we engage the communities that you work with. So those are the feedback questions. Is anyone having trouble opening the form? I'm going to jump right into it. All right, your silence tells me that we need to move. So I'll just keep going unless I hear somebody, because I don't want to waste our time or your time asking for questions. All right, so the first strategy, and the first 3 strategies align directly with the strategies that OD has had before from the past strategic plan. So we've moved it forward into the development of broadband infrastructure. So for the short term, and we're looking here 6 to 18 months, and these are learning and awareness goals. The goal that came out of all of the brainstorming sticky notes you had that kind of we pulled together was understand the needs and develop strategies to successfully, equitably, and sustainably implement Pima's fiber optic ring. So really where we talked about needing to do some benchmarking and all that kind of work, that's really that first 6 to 18 months. Now we've got a couple of objectives that kind of refine that a little bit more. And this is to complete a gap analysis for broadband expansion, including public outreach in the middle mile listening sessions in order to understand community needs more fully. Tribal outreach in order to make sure that the relationships are supported for tribal self-determination and data sovereignty as they move into tribal broadband access. And then finally, researching the requirements and resources for fiber optic ring building out. And this is where that kind of gap analysis came in, so that we understand all of the community and workforce needs and permitting requirements before moving forward. So then moving to midterm, which would be 2 to 4 years, and these are like actions. The goal is to build out physical and community infrastructure to provide sustainable, equitable access to affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband. And the middle mile project will be completed by June 30th of 2028. So we've got 4 objectives under this one. Completing the fiber optic ring is the first one. The second is to develop a diverse infrastructure a provider community that includes anchor institutions as well as spiderweb infrastructure for accessible and affordable broadband access. So it's a kind of distributed approach. 3 is to establish accessible resource hubs and workforce training pathways so that we can support the build out and maintenance of access to broadband. And then finally, to create digital access and data sovereignty agreements with the tribal communities in order to ensure equitable access and sovereignty over digital strategies, data, and information. So that's our midterm. And then finally, long term, which is 4 to 5 years, and we'll start to do strategic planning again. That was hard to say. All individuals and households and businesses throughout Pima County will have consistent, affordable broadband access, including rural and underserved areas by 2030. So the first objective here is, which defines it just a little bit further, is a full suite of online and on-site programs will be available throughout the community, providing basic online safety and digital skills and device training in households so people can get online safely. And then all government organizations with public-facing offices will have Wi-Fi access for customers, increasing the public Wi-Fi access throughout the county. All right, so I'm going to pause there and let you all, I'll give it like 2 minutes so you can fill out your form if you haven't for strategy 1.
Robin, let me ask this question. When it comes to the infrastructure stuff, particularly that in midterm, there are things going on at the state level that will directly impact what we're doing here. Okay, so like you have objective 1, the fiber optic ring will be complete, and then it says providing affordable internet throughout the county through a diverse network of providers. So the county isn't exactly providing affordable internet. It is those providers that are doing that, but the providers will have access to the state's allocation of almost $1 billion from the BEAD fund, from BEAD funding to be able to do that. So is that something we should reword or that we should consider when we're talking about things that will, I mean, it will just drive us towards this goal. It truly will. Because their timing is such that if they're receiving an award, I believe they have to have things in place by the end of 2028 as well.
Yeah, my feeling is this is 1.0. We're going to ask people to give feedback on it, and that all of these kinds of details we can work in the final one and rewording. So if you have recommendations about how to reword that, drop it into, or things we should pay attention to. Because I think that's a question that's really good in terms of how far and detailed does the committee want to get.
Okay.
Chris?
Sorry, we should call him Christopher. That's my bad.
That's
Christopher,
Chris is
sorry.
fine. It's my professional name is Christopher, but it's perfectly fine. My question is so when I'm filling out your form, the Google form, you ask me from strategy 1, midterm goal. Do you want me to choose one or give you my opinion or my knowledge and understanding related to this specifically? So what should success look like? How might we measure it? Do you is this that I'm just kind of struggling with that. Do you want me to identify one of your objectives in the first part and then the second give you my opinion?
Well, that's a good question. If we're really just trying to, from your perspective, what would success look like? These came from kind of the vision that everyone had, but it would be like, oh, okay, maybe coming back to what Michelle was saying, is that we help small providers access that BEAD funding. And we look at how many and we count how many different communities have access through or a variety of access, not just a single provider or something like that. I mean, we really want to just hear from you. This is something, again, that at the end, we're really going to dive into so that we can build into those outcomes exactly what you all are thinking success looks like. But we do want to hear this is just draft one. So this is all iterative. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. It's just because it's forcing me to give kind of like just a sentence, and I appreciate the brevity of it. So no worries. Thank you.
If you feel like this is long enough and anybody wants to send more information, that's great. We were just trying to make it as easy and as iterative as possible.
All right, no, thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool.
So Robin, just to clarify then, it's okay if we speak to like the short-term goal in general versus the specific objectives. That's totally okay.
Yep. Or if you
Okay.
have something and you're like, I don't know about this whole thing, but I know about this objective, then give us whatever you're thinking. We
Okay,
really
sounds good.
this is feedback one. We've got, like almost 6 more months of this.
Thanks.
We won't do this every month, but we will have a lot of iterations. Are we good to move on, or do you need a little more time?
I don't know about you all, but I'm still typing.
Okay. Cool. We'll give it some more time. All right. We good to go? Cool. Strategy 2. So this one, pulling again from the past strategic plan, is the digital skill building. So developing digital skill building initiatives. And so we looked at short term again, midterm and long term. And the short term was the goal is to establish the relationship infrastructure and capacity to support community-based digital skill building initiatives, digital hives and hubs. And people were using the hive hub term kind of interchangeably, and we hadn't really decided on it. So that's why it's got both right now. We probably will want to decide on what you want to call them by the end, but that's why it's got both in all of these. So initially, the objectives for this one will be to update the gap analysis of current digital skills training, introductory through advanced that are available throughout the county. So finishing, re-looking at that needs assessment and gap analysis of what's out there and what people need. Develop partner capacity to provide cultural awareness and sensitive digital skills services within digital hives and hubs models. And then finally, objective 3 is to engage in information sharing and relationship building with stakeholders who will be key partners in developing and delivering accessible, culturally anchored digital skills training on site or in hives and hubs. So one of the things that was really critical here for those of you who weren't there in November is there was a lot of conversation about making sure that everybody who is delivering the skills, because we're going to have to use the distributed approach, really has everything that they need, and that there's a really strong infrastructure of relationships to be able to deliver that through referrals and culturally anchored delivery systems too, so that people get what they need. So then moving into the midterm, after we've kind of built those capacities and done those needs assessments, the goal would be to develop a dynamic ecosystem of equitable and accessible digital skills training and supports that is integrated with fundamental aspects of a digital society, such as career services, health, arts, culture, etc. So this one has 3 objectives again: engage in iterative pilot programs and rapid experiments to test and refine community outreach for digital skills training and supports. Objective 2 is to engage in iterative pilot programs and rapid experiments to test and refine accessible digital skills programming that meets diverse community needs. And finally, to test and refine Hive or hub models to meet those digital skills programming and tech access in communities throughout Pima County. So the reason that those 3 are all separated is because there was a real focus on how do we make sure we're communicating and doing outreach effectively, so testing those models. How are we making sure that our programs are actually meeting the skills that people need? And then finally, how do we bring those programs into the different Hive and hub models? So there's 3 parts, and there was a real emphasis on this one in terms of testing. So how will we measure that? That's a little bit different, right? And then long term, the goal would be a full continuum of affordable, accessible digital skills training that enable all county residents to safely and effectively use technology, participate in a digital society, and achieve their goals and dreams. So there's 4 objectives here. It's a network of community partners, such as community-based organizations, government, business, schools, etc., that provide access to digital skills training, basic through advanced, and access device and tools that allow residents to safely get online. Objective 2 is a diverse suite of digital skills programming available and accessible to all residents, regardless of skills, age, language, culture, or geographical location. Objective 3, a robust network of hives and hubs to provide access to integrated digital skills training close to people's homes. And then finally, to embedded security services are provided for free or at low cost, or free online safety training is provided through a shared network of community partners and hubs and hives. So objectives around building a network, building out those programming, making sure the hubs are there, and then making sure that security and safety services are provided through those. All right, so we'll pause here and let y'all fill out your form for strategy 2.
Just confirming that we can turn this in later. I can't think right and process this fast.
Muted. Yeah, that's fine. You can turn it in later.
I wish I could do it this fast, but I just.
You know, we all have different work styles. Some people like to
Yep.
type 2 sentences in the minute, and some of us like to think about it for a while.
Yeah, thanks.
Are you going to share this collected information with us?
Yes, I will. So the form is set so that it will send your responses back to you for the email you put in, and then at the next meeting, I'll put it in the shared Google Drive, but I will also just send it out, have Michelle share it with everybody.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you,
just
'cause
so
I know-
everybody knows, I already put the links in today's meeting invite. So you should have the links to all of these documents already.
Okay, thank you. I just ask for research purposes. I just like to kind of review. I mean, I like to see anyway the correlation or non-correlation of information. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So are we good to go, or we need a little bit more time? Cool. Go to the next one, and if you need to finish later, that's all good too. Strategy 3 that we talked about was increased access to device and tools. So this is being able to support people with getting the devices and the other technologies that they need to be full digital citizens and that they want. So the short term for this one is to establish the relationship infrastructure and networks and the capacity to support outreach and access for device and tools. So similar to the past one, it's really about the relationship building in the networks, because you will need to use a distributed approach to reach folks where they are. So the first objective is to conduct a landscape analysis to understand the current access to devices and tools and identify options and models of device access and training from best practices, research, and stakeholder engagement. So this will parallel along with objective 1, where you're looking at what is the gap analysis of what's being provided now. Objective 2 would be partner outreach and capacity building to support device access and training in accessible locations throughout the county. So again, building up the capacity of community-based partners to provide these services for device and tool access. And then finally, develop an accessibility plan for equitable device access with embedded skills training. So really making sure that everybody who wants to be able to access the devices and tools that they need to get online safely can do that, and that we can support the community-based organizations or other organizations that are where they might actually come and get that help. So then for the midterm, the goal that we all identified was to test and implement a suite of device and tools access models that are integrated with other digital needs. Again, looking at how people are using digital in their lives, career services, health, arts and culture, etc. And again, this one, when we were doing this in November, there was a real emphasis on figuring out what really works right. So that kind of iterative testing. And so in objective 1, you have identify and test sustainable funding and environmental impact models, device recycling, et cetera. There was a real concern of like, how do we do this green, since technology takes up so many of our resources. Objective 2 is to establish an adaptable tech training plan with flexible models that account for advancements in tools and devices needed for participation in digital society. So really coming up with an adaptable training plan so that we can help as more dynamic, let's say the one that kind of came up was AI. So we may know how to train people to use their iPad or whatever it is, but then how do we make sure that they have access to additional technologies and tools, especially emerging ones, so that we're staying up to date? And then objective 3 is to test and pilot embedded community identified skills development with career services, online safety, et cetera, with device access and training, which is pretty much what Michelle was already talking about today, that it's going to be on the news. So, and then moving into long term, the goal for this one is that everyone in Pima County has affordable access to the devices and tools they need to participate and succeed in digital society. So objective 1 here would be a diverse network of community partners, from community-based organizations to schools, faith-based, government, et cetera, that provide access to devices and tools that allow residents to safely get online or are integrated with the skills development. And then objective 2 is that hives and hubs provide access to basic and emerging tech through lending libraries, community identified classes, digital skills, device training, no cost, low cost, and a bunch of other ways to get people connected through devices and tools. And those we'll figure out that directly relates to objective 2 and 3 in the midterm. So I'll pause there before we go on the last one, so you can get some thoughts down.
I have just one clarification question. So on the Google form, when you're talking about like the different short and midterm goals, when referring to community, I'm thinking like stakeholder groups. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So like organizations who provide X or people who live in this area, that's fine. Okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
All I can say is we did a whole bunch of work last time.
You did a ton of work. And you know, if you're wondering, like on that spreadsheet, you all can go through on your own time if you want and look at, because we put in all of the sticky notes that you had so that you can kind of see how they correspond. So we took them and kind of grouped them, and then took the transcripts from like the report out to create these.
So you're
if you-
talking about, when you say spreadsheet, that's the one that's labeled outcomes 1.0 and all
Yep.
the different tabs with all the stuff. Okay.
Yep. So if you'll scroll down on any of those strategies, you'll see the sticky
Mhm.
notes. You all so if
Yay.
if we've captured the language incorrectly or anything, you know, that's where there's one last question at the end, or just let us know. I mean, we'll be going through this so many times by the end that I think we'll have a chance to get it all cleaned up.
Awesome.
All right, so the last one, strategy 4, and this one wasn't necessarily in the initial strategic plan, but I think that it was something that kind of kept coming up in the conversation and in the brainstorming of outcomes that the advisory board wanted to see. And this was establishing a digital inclusion co-governance. So there was a real focus on kind of the collective impact, working with whole networks of people, because there's no way that that Michelle's office alone can do this, which is why you're all here. And so thinking about how do you do this in a way that establishes co-governance, that really pushes forward collective impact and lays the groundwork so that it isn't just the county making one decision, or, you know, we really can be responsive to the different needs of different communities and different locations. So this one really looks at, in the short term, establishing, the goal would be to establish relationships, policy, and funding infrastructure to design and execute co-governance for digital inclusion. And that builds directly from those first short-term objectives in strategy 2 and 3 about building the networks to support, and the networks to support broadband infrastructure, the network to support all of the device access and all of the digital skills training. And so the first objective would be working groups are established for each strategy, and cross-strategy work group leads from those work groups lead and guide a process that really looks at what are the co-governance processes that we need. So that would be, you know, in the first 6 to 18 months after we finish the plan. Then identifying seed funding to launch a digital inclusion fund. And I know Michelle has already started work on this, but, you know, setting that up and how you do that. And then objective 3 would be alignment and integration with other strategic plans. So making sure that once this is done, that each work group understands how it fits into different initiatives within the county, the city, and various organizations that are part of your collective impact group. Goal for midterm would be policies and structures are put in place for co-governance of digital inclusion initiatives, so that it's formalized and institutionalized within the Office of Digital Inclusion, so that we know that this is how it continues to go, and that it can be driven not just by all of Michelle and her team's hard work, but also by input from the community. So working groups adapt structure to include community and constituent voice, focusing on digital inclusion implementation work. Objective 2 is really making sure that digital inclusion fund is launched to support strategic initiatives and engage community partners in iterative learning and to support co-governance. And then final co-governance model is finalized and adopted by Pima County. And then the long term is a sustainable co-governance model that supports ongoing dynamic community-based response to addressing digital inclusion throughout Pima County. And we have 3 objectives there. Constituent voice, advisory, and iterative dynamic implementation processes are built into the co-governance model. Digital Inclusion Fund management becomes a responsibility of ODI and the co-governance board, and digital inclusion and co-governance are recognized as critical elements of regional economic prosperity. So I'll pause there. I know these were all new ones that we kind of pulled from best practices. So if there's more to think about, or we have a lot of questions there, we'll revisit this a lot, but it's how do we keep this moving so that it's not such a heavy lift for Michelle you all have a very tiny staff and are doing really big work.
Can you say a little bit more about the fund, Michelle? Just like the vision around the fund, like what size are we talking? What focus? I'm just trying to get a handle on that piece.
All right, so we have the middle mile fiber, right? And the point of putting that fiber in place is so that internet service providers or municipalities or state or federal government entities would be able to lease this fiber. So they're going to pay Pima County to use it. Now we're going to keep that cost low enough so that it covers the operation and maintenance of the fiber ring itself. But we also want to include monies that would fund a digital inclusion fund. So what would a digital inclusion fund do? It would be significant enough that we could potentially help to subsidize projects for internet service providers to get them to build to areas where they may not want to build to, so that we can reach unserved households. Enough money to provide grants to community-based organizations in support of the digital skill building initiatives that we identify previously, those iterative pilot programs based on what the community is actually asking for and what they need. So being able to do grant programs like that, but also to be able to fund my office. And so that we're able to build a larger digital navigator core and have the availability of devices to continue to do the learn to earn series of classes and those kinds of things.
Thank you. That's helpful. That's really helpful.
And I will tell you from a county perspective, right, we have to look at the legality of all the things and everything like that. So we just, the county administrator just approved a memo that I put forward to create a broadband executive committee. And this is of directors of Pima County departments that are already involved with this kind of work. How do you get access to right-of-ways in Pima County if you're an internet service provider? What is it that you have to do? And for us to develop a framework that works within Pima County government, but also then using our community advisory board or whatever models, whatever additional things we come up with as related to this particular strategy to get community input and have that transparency and accountability and literally guide it from a human-centered perspective, right? Don't do things to people, do it with them. So we want to make sure that we're getting that feedback as well as we move forward with this.
Cool. Are we good to move on, or anybody need a little more time? All right. The last thing we need to think about is for, as we're moving through this planning process, and we talked about this last time, but for those of you who weren't here, we'll start doing stakeholder engagement for the human-centered design process. So gathering feedback and ideas and all of that kind of stuff from folks in the community starting in February, March, and April. Though only a little bit in April, but we do want to, there are some things that people had noted that were happening in April. So we want to make sure if there's something we can pull it in. And so there's 3 different models for engaging community and doing this work. First is a select stakeholder focus group. So for example, your organization, you may, like say Literacy Connects wants to work with a class and say, let's do a 60 to 90 minute stakeholder focus group that your organization facilitates. We'll provide the activities and facilitation training, you collect the data, and then we'll provide, that'll go into all of the information we collect, but we can also pull out and give your organization that specific data from your focus group or focus groups you run. So the pros of this are, you get really rich specific data for both your organization and for the Office of Digital Inclusion, but it also takes time and recruitment and probably 2 facilitators. So it really depends on how much you want to understand the needs of your folks, specifically if you wanted to do something like this. We'll also have like activity booths at different events, and we'll ask that, Michelle's team will be running some of them, but we also ask that everybody in the advisory board at least does one somewhere, or one of these models somewhere along the way. This could be one of it, or it could just be a tabling booth. But this one, you would have 3 to 4 standalone of the visioning activities. It would be similar to the ones in the focus group, but we're not collecting the actual discussion and transcript from that. People do the activities on their own. They could do 3 or 4 or just 1 or 2, but it gives you broad stakeholder engagement. This would maybe be at like a health fair or something, and some rich data. You do have to have people that are like enthusiastic and invite people in to engage in the activities. So that if you just have someone standing there being like, want to do this, no one does it, and then we don't get good data. But if that appeals to you, that's great. And then the least, I guess, energy intensive is just tabling. We'll have 1 to 2 simple self-guided activities there. We don't get as much data, but we will have more broad data. And this one really doesn't require much facilitation training at all. Just being able to sit at the table and say, would you like to do this? And answering a few questions about what's going on. So as a community advisory board, your roles are to host and facilitate some sort of one of the community engagement visioning sessions, help us promote it and get more folks to engage with the process, and then to help us get public feedback on the draft strategy. So we'd like for you to do now, and you all identified some initial ones, but we would love for in the form, if you could identify which or any or all of these like community visioning models you are willing to take on as an organization, and then any specifics about that, because that way we can reach out to you and start putting together in the new year 2025, which is crazy, a schedule of when these happen and build in facilitation trainings that meet everybody's needs. So that's that piece. Questions?
Any chance you could have some activities available for, what's the date of that, Mary? There's a job fair in January that Pima County is doing. It is on, or maybe it's in February. Yeah, so I think the activity booth thing for the job fair at Pima County's job fair would probably be really great.
Yeah, that would be, and we can have this.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Eric and I have them all roughed up, and we're going to bring them to you all for feedback at the January meeting, but we can even refine them sooner if you need to.
Okay.
Sure.
Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things I'd like to do, but I'm coming at this as a researcher and someone who studies this. And I would be more than happy to talk to somebody at the university related to the Tucson Festival of Books, but I don't have an area or a booth or materials to sit down and have people come. Are there materials that we can get from the Office of Digital Inclusion related to share, or something that you want us to specifically ask, or to because I'm approaching this as a researcher, somebody who studies this, understands this, but I can't necessarily go out and affect action right now.
Well, but you also have access to a very large community, college students. So
Exactly.
what would we have to do to get permission from the university to be able to email all of those college students and ask them questions?
Maybe I can talk with your office about this.
Yeah.
I'll set up an appointment with you and let you know how we can go about that, and we can talk about that so we don't waste everybody else's time.
Absolutely. That sounds great.
Okay,
And
I'll reach out.
Those are good questions, and I think the thing to think for anyone who is maybe not positioned in an organization. I mean, like, even if like Michelle said, we could have you could have access to some students, but, or even if you're willing to help out and man the booth at the Festival of Books. Those are things that really help because Michelle has a small team.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
and I will tell you, it's got me thinking right now. So my son, when he was going to the U of A and his writing class, they wanted him to, you had to get feedback from students about something that you wrote about, and it had to be a kind of a divisive topic. So it had to do with teachers having guns at school. And so he set up this booth with a poster session kind of thing and got students to vote. He was in the campus where the students go to eat lunch, and got people to vote on his poster session. Okay, so that's a simple tabling thing, right? But maybe there's something that we could do that way. And if you couldn't do that yourself, Chris, we could figure out how to do something like that, if that's a viable option, just saying.
I in this day and age right now, probably not
Mhm.
at the university. But that's something that we can talk about.
Sure.
I'll come up with some ideas. There are some
Okay.
constraints related to research to individuals.
Yeah.
Most of them are adults,
Mhm.
but there's some IRB stuff that it's not a big deal to get it filled out, and I'm happy to do that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
But it's a matter of getting it done in time.
There may be some a place that may be really useful to do that is in that freshman class that students, especially first year students, are required to take. That's like a 1 credit or whatever. I don't know. That one seems to me like would be a really
Yeah, there's some of the gen ed student success UNIV 101s, but we can talk about that. I'll
Sure.
reach out to Michelle and we'll set up a time.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. Thanks. Jen, go ahead.
Okay, now I think I forgot what I was going to ask. Let's see. It was about the focus group. Just curious if the level of understanding of just digital inclusion efforts and broadband and all of this terminology, all of these things that are in our strategic plan, in the focus groups, will the participants need to look at the actual plan and understand the level of, I guess, technical knowledge that's in our plan? Because it feels like that's a leap, from English language learners or people. Yeah.
Absolutely not. We're designing all of the activities so that anybody from, like 4th or 5th grade reading level, even though if you've got supports, can easily participate. We will ask for feedback on the kind of goals and long-term outcomes, but I think that we'll make sure that all of it has translations that are very clear into like normal people language.
Plain language.
Strategic plans are one thing. The way you collect and gather information from the public is really different. So all of our tools are really, really, really accessible and easy to use.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we do have a meeting on January the 7th to start planning the regional meeting about digital literacy that we had discussed at the last thing. So if anybody else is interested in participating in a regional meeting that would bring together all different kinds of organizations associated with digital literacy, so we all can get in the room and figure out what each other is doing, let me know and I'll invite you to the meeting.
Michelle, will you add me to that? Because I'm happy to talk about and share some of the materials, but also then I can understand where folks are. So when we're designing. Thanks.
Absolutely.
There's my computer. All right. So last thing, if you didn't finish your feedback survey, because I know it is a lot to digest on an afternoon at the end of December, please finish it today or tomorrow. We'd really love to have it at the beginning of next week so that right after the holidays, Eric and I could start implementing and pulling things together. And then in January, we'll finalize a calendar of events based on what you share with us, and so that we can start to, Michelle's office can start to reach out and plug in places we're missing. And then we're going to schedule facilitation trainings for those events and then provide feedback and advice on those engagement activities that we'll bring. So that's all I've got. Any final questions in our last 2 minutes?
That was super exciting. That was so much, so
It is a
much.
lot, sorry.
It's okay. That was so much for me, you guys, and I've actually looked at this a couple of times, okay? So please just take the opportunity. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. Christmas is next week. We totally got it, okay? But pull together any information and stick it in that feedback form, all right? And in the outcomes document, when you're looking at the tabs and you see where the sticky notes are, like Robin said, if you think something wasn't translated the way you meant it, because it was your sticky note, shoot an email that way or however you need to do that, so that we can make sure and update the information. But our meetings will continue to have conversations like this about what we have going on. And if you at any time feel like we need to have additional meetings, we can do that. Okay. So just like, Chris saying, hey, let me meet with you to talk about what we might be able to do. I'm happy to do that with everybody. Okay. And then along the lines of the focus group things and everything, the Office of Digital Inclusion just found out we were awarded a USDA Rural Utility Services Broadband Technical Assistance Program grant. We did receive that. It will go in front of the Board of Supervisors for their approval of the award acceptance in January. And there is a large community engagement piece with that. And the focus group stakeholder kind of conversations are probably the best for that because there are targeted communities associated with that grant application, that grant proposal. So I'll talk to you about that later, Robin.
Awesome.
Okay.
That's great.
Awesome. Does anybody else have anything they want to chime in about? All right, I'm going to stop the recording for today. Stop.